Hygiene is so important as it ensures the continuation of a healthy body, but what are some hygienic practices that we don't really do anymore? Well, those who are born with freckles were considered unlucky in some cultures, but specifically in the Victorian era, to be born with freckles were advised to rinse their faces with lemon juice or, in more stubborn cases, to rub the skin with carbolic acid. There were even some suggestions to sit in the sun until the freckles burned off. And if premature wrinkles resulted from these harsh so-called cures, young women might look to the habits of their older relatives and drape their faces with thin slices of raw beef before bed. Sleeping with any animal fat on the skin or sheep fat, veal, lard was thought to be restoring the youthful suppleness of beauty, which is pretty on par considering collagen is a very useful vitamin today. Looking fit and healthy is a very commonly shared narrative as it's been defined and redefined multiple times throughout the history, but when it came to places like the Victorian era, weight loss drugs were often permitted and if anything encouraged for both genders, but mainly ladies are to maintain their figures in and out of corsets. Overweight women were instructed to drink their water with lemon, and if that didn't do the trick, to take weight loss substances. Unfortunately, those often contain life-threatening ingredients like arsenic, special cereal dust stuff, and believe it or not, tapeworm larvae. Skinny women didn't have an easy time of it either. They were told to lie still as often as possible in dim light, avoiding all anxiety and endeavoring to feel indifferent to every sensation as one book had recommended. When it came to overall health care, your teeth should be on that list as well. For the Victorians, typically they only go to the dentist when the damage is near to the breaking point, and because they didn't have any toothpaste and wasn't drenched in multitude of poisons that they thrived off on, people would just brush their teeth using salt. Typically using and putting salt on their finger and then rubbing it across their teeth. The toothbrush, as we know today, wasn't invented until 1857. However, it wasn't really the nylon bristle toothbrush of the 1930s that came along that brushing one's teeth became more widespread. Salt is a natural disinfectant that helps with gum disease, and in a few ways, it removes loose debris and cleans the teeth and gums, reduces inflammation and swelling, and soothes the gums as well. It helps get rid of decay and plaque. Gum recession can be caused by eating too much salt, and the gums, a part of the immune system, may pull back to reveal the cementum of the teeth, so making them more vulnerable and less resistant to tooth decay. So while it may look effective, it's also really important to know that it's only temporary removing the surface stains. As for salt, the same holds true, as salt acts as a surface abrasive and can definitely make teeth look whiter, but it can also really damage your teeth enamel, and unfortunately once your enamel's damaged, it's damaged for life. It wasn't until the 1940s that the concept of brushing one's teeth would be considered a routine event. In some places, like in ancient Rome, they would be using urine to brush their teeth, and in some parts of the Victorian era, as I mentioned, use salt. But ancient China also used salt, and not holding the P, it was vinegar instead. Just like Little Miss Vicky's chips, the ancient Chinese civilization, at least parts like the Wei, Jin, Su, and Tang would dip their fingers with salt, tea, wine, vinegar, and basically the latter to wipe their teeth and rinse their mouth. Written by a famous ancient Chinese doctor, essential recipes for emergent use worth of 1,000 gold, mentioning getting up every morning and putting salt on your mouth, holding it for a bit, rinse with warm water, and you're fine. As noted, to make sure your teeth are firm, later the ancient Chinese no longer used salt to clean their teeth, as they have discovered the exclusive, important recipe, tooth powder. Bugs were such an issue because it was common in the medieval period, particularly in poorer households, to line the floor with straw, as this was mainly to keep the damp away. However, it also provided a warm home for bugs and insects. Sometimes nice smelling flowers or herbs were added to the straw in order to improve the smell of the room. Unfortunately, this did nothing to prevent those bugs from breeding or spreading infections though, as these straw floors caused a lot of problems when they were located in rooms where food was eaten. Food dropped onto the floor was also not often cleaned up. Although dogs may have cleaned up some of the droppings, the rest of the food would be for rodents and the bacteria. These bugs were not only made into the homes and floors of houses, but bedding and even people's own bodies and hair were perfectly good places for them to live. Many people who lived in, let's say, the Middle Ages were infected with lice, and if that doesn't gross you out, when the Queen Mary of Scots returned to Scotland from France, she was a little offended that the men were still wearing their hats at the dinner table. It was then pointed out to the young queen that this was not a sign of disrespect to her, but a necessity, as the men kept their hats on in order to prevent not only their long hair from touching the food, but the head lice from falling onto their plates. Some of the wealthiest people in the medieval period may have had access to clean water through servants that were called water carriers, but these were the people that would bring fresh water to the homes for individuals to bathe. If you were poor, as majority of the people of the period were, you would have to travel to the nearest river to collect like clean water. Although we often stereotype them to incredibly dirty, they were actually pretty clean back then. Soap was invented by the ancient Babylonians as early as 2800 BC. Archaeologists have found remnants of what they believe was soap in clay cylinders and found at historic sites. Some of these containers have inscriptions like fat boiled with ashes, which was a common way to make soap. Egyptians had also said to have bathed regularly, as noted in the ancient papyrus found by archaeologists, as this medical text produced around 1500 BC, which contained details on how to combine animal and vegetable oils with salt to make soap. This soap was not only used for washing but also to treat the skin conditions. The Romans and like the Greeks also understood that dirt was the one that was causing the disease. They were also famous for building aqueducts to supply their towns with clean water, and they also used public baths as well as cold and hot rooms, but public baths were also nasty though. The ancient Egyptians in particular were known for their good hygiene. They, as we have seen, bathed frequently and even wore makeup. The ancient Greeks had a similar reputation and emphasizes the benefits of a healthy diet. Egyptian cosmetics and toiletries usually set includes a tube for the eye cosmetic kohl, a razor, tweezers, a whetstone, and a mirror. As far as back as the ancient Roman period, women were said to have used razors, as they had been used tweezers, stones, as well as creams that were used to remove hair. In the Tudor England, it said that people cared about their appearance a lot. People took to carrying little glass or steel mirrors with them, as well as carrying tweezers, as well as combs, ear scoops, and bone manicure sets. Of course, I don't think you can get a bone manicure set at your local shoppers, but maybe you can ask. There's been evidence that people have been shaving since the earliest days of man. It is believed that they used sharpened rocks to scrape away facial hair and may have also used the tweezers to pluck it. The obvious place to begin when discussing the hygiene practice of our ancestors is with their toilet habits. It was not uncommon for medieval houses to be equipped with closet-like rooms or nooks where people could go and relieve themselves in chamber pots. Some of the richest and medieval period had the earliest form of pipework, would transport dirty water and human waste out. Despite these very early versions of indoor toilets, people did not always feel inclined to use them, as some records show that people would do their business in their friend's house in a dark corner. So even with these times, sometimes you can't wipe your butt yourself, so you'd hire someone else to do it. Yes, I'm talking about the groom of stool. That was a position in the royal household. That was, of course, cleaning the king's butt. It had to make sure the booty was clean and dry, and so they had to also wipe down the buttocks with a sponge or wet nurse and just be a glorified butt washer. They were also responsible for helping him urinate, defecate by providing a wash basin for them, just using also a regular old pot, which I don't think they do anymore as the job has been discontinued after 400 years. It wasn't a surprise that when it came to cosmetics as a whole, it would take some time before we figure out the right and safe way to ensure that beauty doesn't have any long-lasting physical effects. But back in the day, they wanted to experiment and use whatever they could to reduce the blemishes that came with hormones and age. Queen Elizabeth I caked on thick makeup to an extent that it almost looked like a clown in order to hide her smallpox scars. Priests would tell women not to wear makeup because vanity was a sin. However, if a woman was sick and dying, wearing rouge to mask her illness was acceptable. Cerause was a foundation makeup of choice for both men and women that gave the famous smooth pale look. However, it also contained lead that seeped into the body through the skin, leading to poisoning, and this makeup also tended to crack and had a very strong odor. If you suffer from genetics like balding, maybe some methods of this era can help you. After all, that hairline is gonna keep going back. So a 17th century publication by Peter Levins gives clear instructions to men on how to cure their baldness and thinning hair by following the following mixture: a strong alkaline solution containing potassium salts and chicken droppings to be placed on the area to be treated. In addition, if men wanted to remove unwanted hair from any area of the body, they could also make a paste containing eggs, strong vinegar, and cat dung. Once beaten into a paste, it should be placed on the areas where the hair is going to be removed, as this might help you out, but after going through the suggestion, I don't think so. I do know now that microblading and tattooing hair that looks like hair follicles kind of worked in today's society, so maybe that, or just shave it all. But in the medieval times, having hair was considered a symbol of power, but if you did shave your hair, it was a huge sign of humility. Monks would shave their heads only to leave a narrow strip of hair, so it might look either way, as just as long as you got your beard. Beards were also signs of honor, and if man touched another man's beard, it was enough as an insult to challenge him to a duel of death. Speaking of hair, knowing bugs and all that were such an issue, in ancient Egypt they would actually have to shave their heads, not just because of the bugs and lice, but because it was really hot in North Africa, so it makes sense. But the French, especially their royal, never cut their hair. There's a story originating from the 6th century in Paris, France, about two princes who were going to ascend to the throne, but then they were kidnapped. The queen consort was given the choice: allow her grandson's hair to be cut or let him die with his luscious locks intact. She chose the sword over the scissors, and even during the medieval period, commoners only washed their hairs on Saturdays because they believed that you should wait until the end of the work week to wash all of the sweat and dirt. Now it's more suggested that you wash your hair every day or every other day depending on the texture of your hair. But interestingly enough, with hair in mind, as long as it's in regards to beauty standards, during the Middle Ages the ideal woman was to have big hips, small perky boobs and a large forehead. Since big foreheads were all the rage, women would actually pluck their foreheads in order to get a higher hairline. The goal was to make their faces look perfectly oval shaped, so if you got a big old forehead, you gotta make that baby shine. Overall though, it's important to keep yourself clean, but probably not in the same statuses that we used to do back in the day. But that's all part of history. And speaking of history, that's all for today. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to like and subscribe. My name is Jess, and I wish you all the best. Bye!